All right, students, these notes are on the digestive system, and I'll go over the parts and the main functions and get into some specifics about one of the functions. All right, so parts. I like that because it kind of shows, well, the beginnings. That's your mouth, right? And then really almost all the digestive organs in that picture right there. Here we go. So the mouth obviously is where it begins, with your teeth and your saliva, and you have both mechanical and chemical digestion going on in your mouth. Then the food goes down that food tube called the esophagus. Your esophagus is a very muscular organ. It's that tube that leads to your stomach. And the muscles, those smooth muscles, right, push the food down. As soon as you swallow, then everything's automatic from there, right? After you consciously chewed your food and then swallowed it, then your smooth muscle involuntary action takes place, and the esophagus pushes that food down to your stomach, and it's called peristalsis. That's the action of the muscles that are in your esophagus, and it's such a strong action that you could be standing on your head and eating food and it would push it up to your stomach. So it's a pretty strong automatic function that goes on with your esophagus there. Of course, then that leads to the stomach. That's this organ right here. Stomach sits a little higher than most people think. Everybody thinks it's down here around where your belly button is. Really, it's up higher, closer to your ribs. What you feel down here around your belly button is really your intestines. And speaking of which, from the stomach, the food's going to keep going to your small intestine. The small intestine is extremely important because that's where nutrient absorption takes place. The stomach breaks down the food quite a bit, and you have a lot of physical digestion, mechanical digestion with churning and grinding going on in the stomach, but there's also a lot of chemical digestion going on because our stomach produces acids and enzymes that help to break down the food. Once it gets to the small intestine, it's kind of a paste. It's almost like a pudding form. It's called chyme, and that chyme is almost all the way broken down as far as bits of food, but your small intestine is going to do a little bit more chemical digestion and going to break that chyme down into molecules and nutrients that your cells can use. And there's a lot of blood vessels that are right around your small intestine, and that's where that nutrient absorption is going to take place. We'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of the small intestine a little bit here. Then what's left, what you didn't use as far as nutrient absorption, gets moved to the large intestine. By the way, the small intestine is smaller around in diameter, but it's actually much longer than your large intestine. And the large intestine is bigger around, but not quite as long. So it has a shorter journey. But by the time the food gets to the large intestine, it's ready for compaction. It's ready for a little bit of drying out. So we absorb some water through our small intestine, but there's not really any more nutrient absorption in the small intestine. It's absorbing water. It's preparing that for waste, right? So what's going through your large intestine is really waste product, and it's going to end up in the lower large intestine, rectum, colon, anus, and out that way. And then you have some organs that the food doesn't actually pass through, right? So these first ones are all organs that the food actually goes through. Then you have what are called accessory organs, and your liver is one. And your liver is extremely important in digestion because it produces an enzyme called bile. Bile really helps with your chemical digestion in your small intestine. So the bile gets produced by the liver, then is dumped into your gallbladder. Your gallbladder stores the bile, and when your small intestine needs it, it dumps it into the small intestine. The pancreas is another organ that has a couple of different functions as it relates to digestion. It produces enzymes that help you break down food, but it also produces a hormone called insulin, and your insulin helps you to regulate your blood sugar. So when you eat a meal, your blood sugar levels go way up. Okay? And because your body wants to maintain that homeostasis, wants to maintain that balance, your pancreas releases insulin. Your insulin brings your blood sugar levels back down to a normal range. And so that helps with that. So people with diabetes have trouble with the amounts of insulin that are being produced by the pancreas. Usually it's the amounts and regulating that blood sugar level. All right, so that's parts. Move on to functions. Okay, so functions, it kind of shows it there at the beginning. The first function with the guy eating that looks like a piece of pizza, I guess. And then the second picture with food moving through the intestines, right? So that last part of digestion is really a real important one in the intestines. And the first part is taking in and breaking down food. So that's the first function of the digestive system. We have to take in the food, and we have to break it down. Right? When we eat, let's say pizza like that, we don't have chunks of pizza going through our bloodstream, right? We have to break it down to molecules. And that's what happens in your small intestine, like I was talking about before. So first we break it down into bits in your stomach. By the time it gets to your small intestine, then we're just looking at breaking it down into molecules and splitting apart molecules and breaking it down to nutrients that your body can use and your cells can use. But we could eat all day long, and if we didn't have this second function, then we would still starve to death. This second function is really the most important, and it takes place in the small intestine. That absorbs needed nutrients, right? Arguably, the most important part of your digestive system is your small intestine because of that. Like I said before, it doesn't matter how much you eat. If you're not absorbing those nutrients, then your cells aren't getting what they're needing, and we cease to exist, right? We wouldn't be able to function after that. So we need that energy. So we have to absorb the nutrients from the food that we eat. This is kind of how it works, right? There's these little structures that are in your small intestine. They're called villi. That's the plural. Villus would be one of them, but that's showing you one there. It says villus, and it shows capillaries. That's a picture from the book. This is a little passage from the book, and you can actually listen to it right here if you just click on that link. This right here says the inside of the wall of the small intestine has three features that allow it to absorb nutrients efficiently: folds, villi, and microvilli. That has everything to do with that nutrient absorption. So your 20 to 25 feet or so of small intestine makes your digestive system extremely efficient. What we eat at your age probably takes somewhere between 10 and 15 hours to digest. From the time you eat it from the time to the time when you're getting rid of waste, it's about that time. When you get to be an adult, it's almost a 24-hour time period from the time you eat something, depending on what you eat, of course. But if you're eating a full meal, it's usually about 24 hours when you get older, from the time you eat to the time you're eliminating waste, that full time period. Our digestive system is extremely efficient. We get everything we can out of the food that we eat and the nutrients that we eat because we have such a long process there. As the food is passing through the small intestines, it's going over those folds, through those villi, across those microvilli, and you have so many opportunities for those nutrients to be absorbed. And that's the point of the structure there, and you'll see that here. This is a close-up of several of those villi, right? Because they're microscopic. You wouldn't be able to see them. They're tiny little structures in the small intestine. So as the food passes through here, you've got way more surface area. And as it comes in contact with one of these little bumps along the side here, those are the microvilli. And it says thin walls, just a cell thick. And then you have a network of capillaries. So those nutrients are going right through there, in through that cell wall and into the network of capillaries and then off to your cells. Right? So your cells are going to take in those nutrients because the blood and the circulatory system is interconnected with those villi and microvilli. So that nutrient absorption is extremely important. That's where it's taking place in the small intestine. All right, then we have another couple of paragraphs from the book. Of course, you can have that read here. What is the digestive system? Just general information about that. The two types of digestion, mechanical and chemical, and here again you could have that read. Some questions about the digestive system, general questions. 3 pages of those, 3 slides of those. Make sure you're making a copy of these slides. Make sure you're adding them to your notebook after you finish filling them in.